Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. The NBA Draft is here. Round one on Wednesday, and on Thursday, round two. The Pelicans right now, as we enter the NBA Draft with the 7th and 23rd pick of the first round. That is what's guaranteed to them on Wednesday. We'll see what takes place with all the other teams, including your Birds, on draft night. To kind of help you get ready for that, Rod Walker, columnist at the Times-Picayune, is going to join us and talk about his thoughts as to what maybe the team may do on draft night. More importantly, his conversation with Joe Dumars, brand new vice president of basketball operations for New Orleans. And also, we're going to get some insider expert analysis from John DeShazier, analyst for the Pelicans radio network, and Andrew Lopez, sideline reporter for the Pels television side of things, along with Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com. We're going to go over possibilities of what could be there at 7, 23, and take a look at where the team is going as we get closer and closer to the start of the new season, now that Oklahoma City is your champions of this past NBA year. So let's get started with our conversation with Rod Walker, followed by, of course, John DeShazier, Andrew Lopez, and Jim Eichenhofer right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
You know, Rod, as we kind of turn our focus to the Pelicans in this draft, this is the reason that we wanted to have you on today, was, you know, obviously had a really good conversation with Joe Dumars and have written a bunch of stuff throughout the month about, you know, what his plans are. I guess we could start with, in terms of your perspective on Joe Dumars. Obviously, people know that he's one of the most respected people in the NBA. As a player, he was that as well. The Sportsmanship Award is named after him, so that should tell you a little bit too about his the respect that people have for him. But I guess we could start with what were your first impressions of getting a chance to sit down with him and meet with him in terms of the kind of person he is?
I think the thing that stood out the most for me, you could just tell that he was like this really genuine guy. I mean, he's from Louisiana, so he gets it. He understands the landscape of this city. He knows how much this city craves a winner. And I think just the respect that he's earned from being a player, being an executive in the league, I think that's going to earn some of the respect for some of his players, especially Zion. I mean, Zion's a guy that obviously, you know, he's had his issues here with injuries and just kind of sometimes not doing everything that you expect from a pro basketball player. I think Joe can probably get that out of him because I think he's just so respected. I think he's going to connect with Zion a little bit better just because he's played in the league for so long and, you know, won championships. So I think Zion would probably appreciate that, and I just think they're going to connect. I mean, they talked a lot. He said they went to dinner, they watched some playoff games together, which would have been like, I guess, back in the first round maybe. But So I think he's kind of getting, you know, I think Zion's listening to him, which is, you know, I think that's a really big key to the future of this franchise. They're going to be good. It's obviously going to center around Zion since, you know, Dumars said, hey, we're committed to this guy. We want him to be the face of this franchise. So they need to have that connection, and I think they have it.
Do you have a feel for, you know, based on sitting down and talking to Joe Dumars as we get ready for, you know, the draft Wednesday night? And I don't mean like in terms of predicting who the Pelicans are going to take but in or what's going to happen in terms of trades, because I think that there will be, whether it's in New Orleans or across the league, it seems like there's going to be a lot of trade activity. But from speaking with him and getting a feel for what he's about, do you have kind of a takeaway in terms of what he wants to do generally with this roster, in terms of what kind of traits in players that he's going to try to focus on bringing in here?
I think the main thing was, well, one of the things he did say is, you know, a lot of people are upset when the Pelicans slipped from 4 to 7 in the draft lottery, and Joe said he wasn't fazed by that at all. He feels like they can get a good player at 7. And so as far as specifically what he wants, he didn't really, you know, they'll never go into that anyway.
Sure.
But I think he's going to be like a big character guy too, kind of like some of the same stuff David Griffin talked about as far as the kind of players he wants. I mean, he wants guys who are going to come in here and kind of buy into what they want to do. And so, I mean, I think that's going to be the main thing for him. I don't know as far as what kind of player he wants. We don't know because we don't. He likes this roster, and he feels like they have some good pieces already. So I think they want to supplement that with some guys. But I don't know. He doesn't need somebody to come in here and be the face of the team. He just needs somebody who's going to come in and fit, just be the perfect fit for this team.
Is there an element too? We know from his playing career and also when the Pistons were at their peak, when he was an executive, they won the championship in 2004. And I think the common denominator between the teams that he played for that won 2 championships and the one that he led was the defense and the toughness. Do you feel like that's something that I would think that when he went back and watched the tape of last season and saw that they were 29th in defense, that's something that would immediately be something that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, and that's one of the things he did talk about was he wanted a team that was going to be really good on both ends of the court, and he wanted – I think this team is going to play really hard. I think that's something that he wants. He talked about the city of New Orleans. He wants this team to kind of be a reflection of what the city of New Orleans is. And, this city is out. People always talk about how resilient people in New Orleans are. He wants this team to play like that. He wants them to, just kind of get after it and kind of give you something to be proud of. Even if you don't win, obviously you want to win. But if you don't win, he wants fans to be able to look at this team and say, man, this team was really playing hard and fighting to the end. We've seen a lot of games where this team just kind of let go of the rope in the fourth quarter, and I don't think we're going to see that anymore because that's part of the culture he wants to build here.
You obviously wrote, people that follow the team closely, I'm sure, read a lot of what you wrote throughout the month from talking to Joe Dumars. You also recently wrote an article about Troy Weaver as well. Can you kind of talk about what was in that article and just what your impressions of what his role is going to be?
Yeah, with Troy, he didn't want to talk for he didn't want to interview. He just said he wasn't really ready to do that right now. I think he's kind of locked in on this draft, which is understandable. But that's one of the things that Joe Dumars talked about was, with Troy, he feels like he has a guy who, in the word Joe used, was elite in finding talent. And so I talked to some other people. I talked to Will Dawkins, who's now the GM at the Washington Wizards. He worked with Troy in Oklahoma City in 2008. They got there at the same time. OKC had just moved from Seattle. And that was the year that OKC drafted Russell Westbrook with the number 4 overall pick. And Russell Westbrook wasn't really, most people didn't have him slated as a number 4 pick in the draft. But Troy Weaver went in there and talked to Sam Preston. He was like, look, this is the guy we need to get. And one of the quotes that Will Dawkins gave me that I thought was really interesting was that when I was asking him about the strengths of Troy Weaver, he said that he's a guy who, he didn't just look at a player for what he is now. Like, Troy can kind of see what this player can become. Like, he kind of can project, like, okay, he may be just average guy now, but this guy has, Hall of Fame potential. And he saw that in Russell Westbrook, and, they drafted him, and, he was right. Russell Westbrook ended up being one of the, best point guards. So, he saw that, and you look at the Detroit Pistons roster, and obviously Weaver didn't have a lot of success as far as wins and losses in Detroit, but he laid he got the pieces there that got them to where they are this year. And he drafted some really good players. They may not have had the right coaches and maybe didn't all mesh, but you look at their roster. He was responsible for drafting the guys that have made his team successful.
Yeah, it seemed like what they really needed was, and they did this successfully. Trajan Langdon, another, coincidentally came from here, was they needed to add some veteran guys that would help them become a more mature team, just adding that experience. But like you said, some of the players that Troy Weaver drafted, like Asar Thompson, to me fits the mold of some, not exactly the same thing, but with Russell Westbrook, but kind of that thing where it's like you can see the raw ability that this guy has, and same thing with his brother who's in Houston now that I think the Pelicans are going to see a lot, unfortunately, in the next decade or so. You can see that what the player is now, 2, 3, 4 years from now, he's going to be at a level that I think is dangerous. So I think those are all interesting points about, his time in Detroit as we go into this draft. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was I remember, I think this was a little bit maybe right after Joe Dumars came in, or maybe it might have been right around the time you spoke with him, you tweeted or X'd the point about you think that Joe Dumars' impact could be the greatest on Zion. Can you kind of expound on that?
It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I just think his ability to, having played in the league, we've talked to Zion over the years. Zion kind of keeps up with NBA. Like, he knows the history of the game, like more than most people you'd expect at Zion's age. So I think he knows what Joe Dumars did in Detroit as a player and as an executive, and I just think he can really appreciated and respected. And I think the fact that Joe Dumars trusts Zion, I mean, Joe talked about how when he sent Zion to the lottery, he did that for a reason. He wanted Zion to, like, you know, kind of take ownership and be the face of this team, be the guy that sits at the podium on lottery night. And I think sometimes you have to give people responsibility and, like, make them own it. And I think that's what Joe's going to do with Zion. And if Zion, you know, if he accepts it and does what he's supposed to do with it, I mean, I think he can run with it and say, okay, this is my team, and I am the face of this team. And I just think, you know, I think that's probably going to work. And again, I mean, time will tell. I don't think Joe doesn't even, I mean, he can't guarantee you that it's going to work. And one of the things he says is that, hey, time will tell. But he's at least given, you know, trust in Zion with it, and, you know, we'll see what he does with it.
It's interesting you said that. I was talking to Jim a little bit about it before we were recording today, and I kind of feel your interview and others that he's done since he's come here this summer leading into the draft, it's kind of, I don't know, a theme or a message I'm taking from him is he's looking at this roster, he's looking at this team, he's looking at this coaching staff, Coach Green, everybody, and seeing what he has first. You know, a lot of times, Rod, when change happens, you know, Jim's moving cubicles. I mean, you know, it's just different things. Right. You know, different people come in, want their own. Right. But I almost feel like he's being very purposeful, and he's vocalized that he wants to see what he has, what kind of team they are this year before we start kind of creating. We were talking about the finals before recording. We know the identity of the Pacers. They're going to run you down, you know, up and down the court. We know the identity of OKC. Get ready, because they're going to play hard defense. And I think that's almost him. He wants to see what the identity of not only the roster, but the organization is. He has an idea what he wants. But don't you get that feel from him that instead of just coming in and going, this is it, this is what I want, all that. And that kind of leads to what you're talking about with Zion. All right, look, you want to be this guy? I want to see how you act to this. Here you go. Here's the responsibility. Let me see it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Joe always talks, he said it twice. He said it at his introductory press conference, and he said it when he was talking to me, is that, you know, when he came in, he didn't come in here just doing a lot of talking. He did more listening than talking. He talked to everybody in this building about just, you know, kind of trying to get a feel for what was going on here. And that went from players to coaches to the medical staff, because, I mean, injuries is definitely a thing that he wants to get a handle on. And, you know, he said, you know, they're doing a lot of work on that now. I mean, they're following up with these players. You know, when are we going to visit this guy? When are we, you know, what's the latest on his rehab? Like, they're really, like, you know, just honing in on that. And, you know, hopefully that makes a difference, because, I mean, obviously injuries decimated this team. I know a lot of fans were down on Willie this season, but you look at Willie the year before that, he won 49 games. I don't think Willie Green just all of a sudden forgot how to coach or anything. So I think just addressing the injuries is going to be a big thing. I think Joe's done that, but I think he's just really, like, done a good job of just trying to see where this franchise is without him just coming in here just making wholesale changes, because he's, you know, he was in New York. He wasn't here seeing all the day-to-day things. So I think he wants to fix whatever it is, and he knows that the people are the ones that you have to listen to in that situation.
Definitely not going to sit here and ask you to do a Rod Walker mock draft or predict who's going to be the picks. But, I mean, as we kind of talk specifically about the fact that the Pelicans go in with the 7th pick and the 23rd pick as we record this, that's what it is. We don't know if that's going to change by the time we post. But what's your feel for number 7? Are there guys that you like, or is just in general? I mean, do you feel like that's a good spot, even though that there was obvious disappointment that they had the 4th worst record and ended up picking 7th?
No, I think there's some good guys at 7. I think, to me, I think you maybe even up to 8. I think once you get past 8, you might be dropping off a little bit. But I really like what they can get. I don't know if, like, Con Kneppel from Duke is the guy who I really like. It seems like he's kind of moving up, so I don't know if he'll be there still at 7. Their center, who I will try to pronounce his name. Come on, Malawach. Yeah, yeah, him. I mean, I think he's a guy that, you know, that could be really good. Obviously, Ace Bailey's been a lot of talk about him. Just, you know, people thinking he wants to play with Brooklyn, but he's a guy that. And again, we don't know who Troy Weaver likes, but I mean, if he likes these guys, we don't know who Dumars like. But Ace Bailey's a guy that's 7. If you get him, you might go for him. And there's some other guys that Jeremiah fears, like, these guys could fall, and if they fall to 7, I think the Pelicans will have some really good options with that draft pick.
Yeah, Ace Bailey seems like he's already had a dramatic NBA career, even though he hasn't officially been hired yet by anyone. But yeah, as far as number 23 goes, are there certain players that you like, or I mean, is this the kind of thing you mentioned how I think a lot of people feel the same way, that maybe there's a tier that ends at 8 and then there's a drop off, but I mean, where does 23 fit right now? Is it the kind of thing where it's like, okay, maybe that you can find somebody that's a good role player in that spot?
I think you can. I think this draft is probably deep enough where you can get you a good role player there at least. And I don't even know if this guy will be a role player. I think Walter Clayton Jr. at Florida, if he happens to be at 23, I think you're getting a really good player. And I go back to that 2008 draft in Oklahoma City. When Troy Weaver, he got Russell Westbrook at 4, and he got Serge Ibaka at 24. They had 2 first-round picks that year. So, I mean, Serge Ibaka had a good.
I'd take Serge Ibaka.
Right, you take that. He was a big part of that OKC's little run they had there when they were a really good team. So, I mean, you might can get a good. I mean, you can get a good player there, and I think that's what they. At first I was thinking, they may package this pick and try to move up with something else. But now I think they may say, okay, we can find us a guy at 23 that's really good.
It's interesting. Well, Walter Clayton Sr., right, out of Florida, and
junior.
He's junior.
Okay, you got a senior next to him. Yeah.
Okay, maybe he is.
Regardless, he's an upperclassman. He's not a rookie or a freshman.
Yeah.
So see senior up here. But my point is, this team, this organization likes having guys that has a little experience under their belts.
Yeah, I mean that would be good for them if they can get a guy who you can play right away.
Along those lines, that I thought was been really cool during we did a 6 podcast looking at every team and all those players. I'm with you and I'm with Joe. I think you're going to find a player, somebody around 7. But I find interesting too is going to be fit a lot with these teams, right? Whether it's do they need shooting, do they need a defensive player, 3-point shooting. And I was just thinking, watching LSU win the national championship, and what Jay Johnson was saying, how he built that roster. I almost feel like the NBA is sort of going to like an NIL era build. You get that star, you get that guy. Look at the 2 teams that played in the finals, right? Their 2 stars weren't drafted by the Pacers and OKC and Halliburton and SGA, but building through the draft helped surround those 2 guys with young players. Then to Jim's point, sprinkle in a vet here or there. I almost feel like today's college NIL roster almost is what I think the NBA roster is going to be over the next couple of years. All of a sudden, I was probably yawning. We got a whole day for round 2. Like, teams didn't care about it. I don't think that's the case moving forward with that new CBA. That's kind of what I felt in talking to a lot of writers that cover these teams. That from now on, to your point, you got 23, you got 2 first-round picks. Make use of them. Make sure they hit. Make sure there's something that they can bring to your roster. Do you kind of feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the way things are going right now. And I mean, you do that. Obviously, you got to hit in free agency, but yeah, I think that's probably the wave of the future for the NBA.
One of the things kind of tied everything together that you just said too. I'm wondering if one of the impacts of the NIL is that you're going to start to see some of these players who a few years ago were coming out in the draft, even though they weren't sure whether they were going to be a first-round pick or not. And it was a gamble because it was like, well, what if you don't get picked, or what if you get picked 50th? I think some of these guys now are going to stay in college, and I wonder as time goes on, are we going to see more second-round picks be the Herb Jones types where they played 4 or 5 years in college, and even though people try to downgrade the players who are 22, 23 years old, the best part about those guys is, beyond the fact that if you're getting them in the second round, they're cheap contracts that under the new CBA is great, is that these guys are more ready sometimes at 22, 23. So I wonder if the NIL is going to indirectly have an impact on the NBA draft, because you're going to start to see, I mean, it feels like we've had years where the entire draft was guys who played 1 year in college and then a bunch of guys from international ball that were, also 19 or 20 years old. Yeah. It seems like maybe it's going to flip back the other way. And I mean, we've seen that with the Pelicans, not just Herb Jones, but Trey Murphy also played multiple years. Antonio Reeves played 4 or 5 years, I think it was, in college. So, I mean, is that going to be an outlier, or is that going to be part of a trend that we see that is a result of partly of the NIL?
And to your point, guys, we've seen, I think in the last couple of months, a couple of reports, due to what Jim just said with NIL money now being available, some Euro leagues maybe either shutting down or not playing because they're seeing a lot of those young kids that's where they got their experience. They're going to college because they can make more money on NIL. So that's going to be interesting to see the influx of foreign players now playing at Duke, UNC, some of the bigger schools and stuff. And if that keeps kids around, or if that just strengthens it, I don't know. I get a feel that all of a sudden we're going to be paying a little bit more attention to Wednesday, Thursdays, in the draft. And I think you're going to be getting better players as opposed to what you just said, being able to project 5-6 years. I think teams are going to need guys that can come in and do something within relative, future and stuff.
You look right across the street at the Saints. They drafted a quarterback who's 25 years old. So, I think that's kind of, you get these guys who can come in and play right away, a little bit more established. You don't really have to groom them. And so, I think that definitely helps.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things you said, Gus, reminded me, one of the players that we profiled, that we analyzed was Kasparas Yakachonis. I think I got it right.
That's right. He's so good at that, isn't he?
He's a good example. He's from Lithuania, but he came over to play college ball. I don't know the full story, but I think that was partly because of the NIL too. That it's just, and he's going to be maybe top 10, top 14 lottery pick as well. So maybe we will see that, something that happens more often.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the podcasts we had when we featured Carlo Makovich, talk about how any kind of money helps where he comes from. He's setting up his family and stuff like that and things of that nature. So, again, start thinking of things of that nature where you can get, I don't know, go hawk some chicken fingers or something somewhere and you get a couple mil or a couple 100,000. I mean, that's a big thing, for a lot of people in a lot of areas. So I think all in all, though, I do feel excited about this draft. I feel like let's see what takes place. And I, for one, don't telegraph. I don't mind OKC or even Indiana being in the finals and OKC winning because, look, I love seeing that. I mean, I'm a dad. And seeing one of those players yesterday holding the baby and the other players making sure his head's okay. I love how they play together. And I love how together that team is.
Yeah.
So I like it. I like it because it wasn't just about, hey, let's grab some stars together and go win. It was a process. They're together. They're within the community. They care. It almost seems like almost a very New Orleans sort of style when teams win here. It's like that. It's all for one kind of a thing. So I don't mind it, man, in this day and era. And that's 7 straight new NBA champions in 7 straight years.
Yeah, that was the thing I was most impressed with about OKC, just how they all bought in. It didn't seem like there were any egos on that team. I mean, for the past 2 seasons, every post-game interview, you'd have the guy they're interviewing and the rest of the team standing around.
They're having fun with him.
And they just, you thought that would say, okay, this is going to get old eventually, but it didn't for them. And I don't think it will even next year. I think they can kind of ride this out. I mean, they're the youngest team to win a title in 40-something years.
Yeah, since Portland in 1977, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you didn't take it in this direction. I thought maybe you were going to, but I think another part of it, Gus, is the small market part of it. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned 7 different champions in the last 7 years. To me, it's part of it is just kind of the hope that it provides. I think a lot of franchises across the league. Eastern Conference is a different conversation right now in terms of how wide open it is because of some of the injuries that have happened. But overall, I just feel like there's maybe never been a time where most of the teams in the league can look around and be like, if we make a bunch of good decisions, with the draft obviously being part of that, we can put ourselves in a lot better position and maybe we can get to where we're at that level where we can compete. So, I mean, I think one of my takeaways from Oklahoma City winning too is I've heard people say before about international fans of basketball that aren't from America. They say, like, if you ask them, they think Oklahoma City is the same size as like Chicago. They have no idea because, and I think that's a credit to the way that the NBA has made it so where it is more of a level playing field where you don't feel like you have to be in one of the biggest markets to win the championship. And if you look at several of the teams that have won in recent years, it's similar size to New Orleans. When Milwaukee won it in 2021. Yep. Oklahoma City is one of the smallest markets in the league as well. So, I mean, it just seems like it's becoming more of where the opportunity is there. You have to make the right decisions, though. You have to nail the draft. You have to make sure you're signing the right free agents. And it seems like, I think this is something we'll see on Wednesday and Thursday, too, is the trade part of it, to me, is so huge now because free agency has almost dwindled to nothing. It's like the star players are not becoming free agents anymore. It's like if they have a year left on their contract, they're either getting extended or they're getting traded. So the trade part of it to me is also maybe bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah. With Joe Dumars, I specifically asked him about the small market versus big market thing. You know, one of the things he said is he doesn't think that's really a big thing. He says if you have the right culture in a small market, players would rather go to a small market team with a good culture than go to New York if the culture's bad. So That's why he's focusing on, building the right culture here, making this a place where, you're treating the families right. You have guys that want to come to New Orleans. They're like, hey, they treat people right in New Orleans. So that's going to be his big thing. And I think that, that pays off if you can do that.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm excited. Let's see what happens. And there's no doubt he's all about Louisiana. He has no problem saying that. And look, and around these parts, you know how that works, Rod.
Right.
It helps the fan base. And if you're trying to get people to buy in and have some excitement,
yeah,
it's kind of the approach to go with it, man.
Yeah, winning eventually wins them all over.
Winning does make everything better, really.
Better.
There's no doubt. Mr. Rod Walker, X and Blue Sky as well. Go check him out. Columnist over there with the Times-Picayune as always, man. Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, getting you ready for the NBA Draft Round 1 Wednesday, Round 2 Thursday. Mr. John DeShazier, analyst for your New Orleans Pelicans. Andrew Lopez. Good to see you, man. How are you doing?
I'm good, very good. Excited for this draft. I'm glad that it's finally here, and I can stop looking at mock drafts over and over and over and over.
A little bit of action leading into the draft, JD. A couple of teams making some moves, having a little fun.
Yeah, I mean, everybody trying to improve, and you'll see everybody saying, this team won the summer when, well, I take that back because everybody always says the Lakers win the summer every summer, right?
That is very true.
So, they'll be talking about who won the summer and that kind of thing. And look, nobody knows nothing until they hit the court, and that's when you decide who won the summer.
I believe Philadelphia won the summer last year too. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, it must have been Philly and the Lakers because the Lakers win every summer. The Lakers win every summer, according to TV.
Right.
They win every summer, and it's like, man, this team should have like 72 championships because they win every summer.
Well, we only have 25 minutes to get into what the Pels are going to do, but Jim could take all of that time based on just a simple discussion in the last 24, 48 hours, Jim, after the Thunder win the finals. And it's all about, well, nobody cares. It's all about when LA or anybody else wins the finals. So
true.
You know how that works.
Yeah, it doesn't count for the same amount
That's
somehow.
true. You're absolutely right. I saw them ranking in order of the last 7, the least of importance. Anyway, bottom line, we'd like to see the Pels, right? Hoist the Larry O'Brien, get back into the postseason, do those things. So, JD, we'll start with you. Scale of 1 to 10, very simple. 10 being obviously the most important. How important is this draft for the Pelicans relative to perhaps other years?
I would say I'm not really alarmed by anything. So I'd say a 2 right now because I think the Pelicans are more interested in who they have coming back. When you're talking about Zion and when you're talking about Trey Murphy and you're talking about, DeJounte Murray coming back at some point next season, Herb Jones, really you're more invested in the now if you're the Pelicans. So, yeah, the draft picks, if you use both picks, will be obviously something that you can hopefully build with for the future. But the Pelicans is right now. I probably shouldn't say this as an employee of the team, but I'm not interested in 3 years from now. I want it now. I see Oklahoma City and I see Indiana and I say, you know what? Small market teams can make this thing go. So why can't the Pelicans make this thing go? And the Pelicans really are kind of centralized on health as they have been for the last several seasons. And we've seen what happens when Zion Williamson is healthy and he's playing that 28 to 30, 32-minute mark, some of what this team can be. And then now you bring back Herb Jones and you bring back Trey Murphy healthy. You get an improved Eve Meese and you get an improved Carlo Makovich. And, you add in a Kelly Olynyk. And, you've got some parts that look really good. So the draft part for me, for the Pelicans is, are they going to find a point? Because kind of need one. So are they going to find a point and who will that be? And even then, you don't want to necessarily throw rookie point guards into the fire, but I still think this team has to have one.
I think it's probably a 4. Like, I still don't think nailing the draft is as high on the list as it is of making sure you have the right tools going into next year. They're like for your toolbox. You mentioned, needing a point because at some point, DeJounte will come back, but he is going to miss a chunk of time. I think getting the extra pick kind of adds a little to the importance of it because now you got 2. Now you can try to there's 2 swings at it, if you will. Obviously, you would like to get hits with both of the swings that you take here, but I think it's, it's not, if you were 1 or 2 in a draft, like you need to hit those.
Yeah.
You obviously, when you're picking 7, you're picking mid-lotto, you want to hit on the number 7 pick. But all of these other tools, like how much is that number? I mean, depending on what position, like how much is that number 7 going to play right away?
Yeah.
I mean, we saw Eve get kind of thrown into the fire last year, but he was the number 21 pick, and we thought he was going to spend most of his time in Birmingham last season. So 7 pick, obviously, you would think is going to play a little bit more because of how things are slotted, but probably I'd say a 3 or a 4.
I think the way this was worded was kind of open to interpretation. I mean, I had a 7, but on the scale, but only because I feel like I was maybe more emphasizing the part about relative to other years that the Pelicans have drafted, and I kind of look at it more as like you're not going to get this opportunity to pick this high very much. I mean, besides Buddy
Hopefully
Hield,
not.
Right. Besides,
I'd like to be picking 30. That's just me.
So yeah, I had a 7. But on the other hand, I think short term, it's the kind of thing where they don't need a savior. The reason I put the importance as high as I do is because I feel like down the road, this is, hopefully this will be the last time they pick this high. And 2 or 3 years from now, you want to be able to look back at 2025 and say, hey, they got somebody that is a big pillar for the future, somebody that they can build around. And this opportunity doesn't come around very often. So I had a 7, but I guess I kind of looked at the question just from a slightly different angle. But to I think what a lot of what JD mentioned too is the thing that makes them an outlier compared to a bunch of the other teams picking near them, especially the Washingtons and the Charlottes, is that they're not at the first step of rebuilding the way that Washington is, where they're just trying to figure out, let's just put a bunch of guys out there. They drafted they had 3 or 4 first round picks that all played a lot. It's not that kind of situation. So they don't need someone to come in and save everything. But I also think for long term, even if they take somebody this year who as a rookie isn't ready to be a dominant player or be a huge part of what they do, but a couple years down the road pays off, I think that'll be huge as well.
Yeah, no doubt. JD, we mentioned some teams maybe perhaps making some moves beforehand. I know Jim's been saying this during our process leading up to the draft. Look out for trades as opposed to maybe for agency and stuff. Pels getting the 23rd pick as of now as we go into the draft as well to go with the 7th pick overall. When you saw the news, you heard this team acquired another first-round pick. First thing that went through your mind was?
First thing I thought was probably developmental guy, a G League guy that you can hopefully shape into what you want him to be. Now the Pels have had some success, obviously, with later picks, whether it be Yves Messi or Herb Jones. They've shown the ability to pick the right guy for what it is they do. So you don't necessarily say that the number 23 guy will spend even the whole season in Birmingham, but you don't know. But I think I don't want to say a luxury, but kind of is a luxury that you have that guy that you can kind of stash away, and you can refine him, and when you bring him in, he's a little bit more prepared to play in the NBA. Now that's assuming that they're not going to do anything with these picks, because you can always take these picks and you can package them up and you can try to do some stuff. Who knows? But if you keep him, I think it's more of a developmental guy for Birmingham, because again, if you're looking at the Pelicans roster now, there just isn't a whole lot of space for a guy to play, especially when you're talking about a team that wants to be in the playoffs. And to get in the playoffs, you're going to have to win 50 at least.
Yeah.
I think it's a little of this, like, you make this trade because there's somebody in that range that you like, and you did not want to wait and use that pick the following year. You went and got it because there's somebody in that range. If we're talking about tiers in this draft, we've heard people talk about it's an 8-person draft in the top 3 tiers. That 4th and 5th tier are wide open for some teams. When we're looking, we've talked about when we've looked at mock drafts, when we were trying to make the draft rankings, and a guy like a Noah Asenge from, I've seen him as high as 9, I've seen him as low as 23. Cedric Coward, I've seen him as high as 10, as low as 24, 25. There are guys in this 4th and 5th tier that there's a wide range on. And you have 23, you're now in a position maybe you do get somebody who was 14th on your board, 16th on your board. And if you can take somebody who you had labeled as a late lottery pick at 23
to win,
all of a sudden you're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I think if that's the case, if that's where you're kind of going with it, if you're also taking somebody, and this is we knew a little bit about what Griff's draft strategy was. We've seen what Troy Weaver did in Detroit. We've seen his kind of background. We've seen what Joe Dumars is able to do. But maybe you go get a guy who's played 4 or 5 years in college. Sure. And if you're adding a 22, 23-year-old to this team, I don't know how much time they're going to spend in Birmingham, but maybe they come and they do push somebody for some minutes. And if you're creating competition, even with some of these guys who are coming back, I think that then elevates everything that you're trying to do.
My immediate reaction to them getting the 23rd pick was, man, I'm not prepared for this. I've only studied the top 15 guys. So luckily in the days since then, though, I've just about tripled maybe the amount of players that I've watched a video of and read about and tried to do a little bit of amateur scouting on so that I'm not completely blindsided when the 23rd pick comes up and they take someone. But yeah, I mean, I think to one of the things that JD said about, if it's a late first rounder, maybe it's a guy who plays a little bit in the G League. But I also think, too, that I think we talked about this a little bit with Rod Walker in the previous segment, that there's more guys that are coming out of college that have played 4 or 5 years. So from that standpoint, maybe there's somebody in the later part of the first round or even second round. I think we're going to see a trend that there's more experienced guys coming out. So, I mean, is the guy at 23 going to play a lot if they pick someone next season for the Pelicans? I don't know. I mean, maybe not. But either way, I think there's a possibility you get somebody that fits the mold. I mean, this would be amazing if it's anybody that's as productive as Herb Jones, who played 4 years in college, Trey Murphy, who played multiple years, Antonio Reeves, I thought was really good last year. So, I mean, maybe just giving yourself an extra swing at that part of the draft, whether it's late first round or second round. I think it looks a little different than it did a few years ago just because of the group of players that are available. You're just getting more of those 22, 23-year-olds. It's not guys that you have to kind of wait for their bodies to develop the way that you have to do with a lot of the 19-year-olds. So, I mean, I'm excited for it from that standpoint of however they use it. Yeah,
the more at-bats you have, the better the percentage of getting a hit. I mean, so, you might have 15 at-bats, but if you get 2 hits, hey,
that's all you need.
It's got to be the right 2.
Yep. Yeah, I know sometimes I make analogies to the NFL because of where we are and things like that, but we all covered football in some way, shape, or form. It's almost like when you had that training camp roster, right? Try to acquire as much talent as possible and see what pulls out, because that leads us to our next topic. When I look at the Western Conference, I mean, you almost chuckle, right? I mean, it's just like, we already know it's difficult. Yeah. And as I pull up the standings, I'm looking at it as I'm about to ask John here this question about what other team in the Western Conference and what they've done in the offseason intrigues you. When I look 1 through whatever, all of the teams in it, every team's either done something already or, as I look to my right at the draft order, are drafting above the Pelicans. I mean, like, there's the Spurs above the Pels in the standings, and obviously we know they're picking second. Dallas is there. They're going to be making moves. So you're looking at all these teams, JD, in the West that have either made offseason moves already or picking high in the draft.
Yeah, and we should preface this by saying, too, that this isn't just like what they've done so far. It's more like projecting forward as well of which offseason is the most intriguing to you as you look forward to just kind of looking ahead and being like, what are some of these teams up to? Which ones that's the most interesting to me?
I want to know what's going on with Memphis, because look, I don't want to see Memphis succeed, obviously, but to let go of Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane can be a first, second, or third option any given night, and to have a guy who can shoot with his splits, who can play the way he plays, who, when Ja Morant is out, can play the point, can then go back and play the 2. When Triple J is not having a great night, who can give you 28, 30. Those kinds of guys are kind of hard to come by. And so to let him go and to say, well, I guess they're trying to, do some things salary-wise with Ja and Triple J, but that is a valuable piece to let get out of the door. And so I want to see how they're gonna replace that, because look, I fully intend for them to hopefully take a step back, because when you're talking about the Western Conference playoffs, obviously for the Pelicans to get in, somebody's going to have to come out.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, and somebody's got to step out even in that play-in race. And I think the intrigue with Memphis started with 9 games left in the regular season when Taylor Jenkins got fired.
Yeah.
So that has been a thing. Am I allowed to cheat and just say the rest of the Southwest Division?
Why not?
Okay,
Go
cool.
for it.
I'm going to make my own rules. The entire rest of the Southwest Division. We've already seen Houston make their move and go get Kevin Durant, and how they're going to continue to build around him. But unfortunately, let's start with the teams who have 1 and 2 in the draft who just happen to be in your division. The Dallas Mavericks, and how they're going to kind of tool this roster around Cooper Flagg. Remember, they're also not they're in a position similar to New Orleans where they're not going to have their lead guard for a majority of next season because of Kyrie's ACL. Mm-hmm. Do you go out and get a veteran point guard to kind of run the show for a little while? Maybe somebody who has played a lot of defense in their life, since defense wins championships, so I've been told. But then the San Antonio Spurs, they're doing this very patiently. There was a lot of, and I mean, I made the jokes right after. With as soon as the lottery happened, you're like, all right, well, 1 or 2 gets traded for Giannis if he decides he's going to ask out. And instead, it's no, we're going to go ahead and we're going to build. We're going to probably take Dylan Harper, and now you've made your trade for De'Aaron Fox. You took Stephon Castle. Now you have another third, in theory, lead guard possibly coming to you in Dylan Harper, all building around Victor Wembanyama. They're not trying to speed that process up. And I think, the year I spent there was a huge emphasis on that. Let them kind of grow. And I think, do they make any of the smaller trades? They were in the KD trucks reportedly. So what do they do? Because I think it's going to be scary when you have a 7'5", 245, 50-pound guy roaming the paint.
But you just mentioned, they've got a lot of repetitiveness.
Yeah.
Especially at the one.
Yeah, so what do you do?
Does somebody move off? Look, if anybody knows how to use a player as a six man,
Spurs,
it's the Spurs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You would think 2 of those guys are going to start. One of those guys is going to come off. Where does Devin Vassell work? There was even a little bit of him playing some 4 last year, like in some smaller lineups. But they have a lot of tradable contracts, a lot of good numbers to be able to kind of move some things around. So if they do make a swing, or are they lining themselves up? And they made one swing with De'Aaron Fox, but are they lining themselves up to take another swing?
And they got a guy who can make you right.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? you can have some mismatched pieces, but you can just say, you know what? Okay, we're a little small, but you know what? We're going to funnel them down there and let Wemby handle it.
The Shaolin monk that is Victor Wembanyama with his shaved head.
Yeah, so you got a guy who can make you right.
Yeah, I'm curious with them, too, that it seems like, to me, generally speaking, you want to surround him with shooting, but if they take Dylan Harper, they just have a bunch of attacking guards now.
Yes.
They don't have the spot-up shooters. Yeah. So I'll be curious to see how that works, because it seems like, obviously, we've seen De'Aaron Fox for years and years, that he's a guy that gets into the paint, and it seems like Harper is the same way. And Castle's not really a 3-point gunner spot-up guy either. So, it'll be interesting to see how they figure that out. I actually had the 2 teams that I had that I'm the most intrigued by their off seasons in the West are same as JD. I said Memphis. I think it's kind of like the Brian Windhorst meme of like, why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would they trade Desmond Bane? When I first heard about it, I
just want to point out that the picture, like what is happening, that is like my profile picture for Brian. If I call it like that, just shows up on my phone.
Nice. Yeah, it's. I guess it's. I've heard people say. Who knows, that it was one of those things where they got such a great offer that they were like, we love Desmond Bane, but for this we have to do this trade because of how much they were putting in that package. But I just want to see what else are they up to. They have. You would think there has to be something else going on.
There's gotta be.
With them. It wouldn't make sense. I mean, there has to be other moves. If that's the only move they make, I don't understand necessarily how they treated this offseason.
And it is part of that is now when you have first and second apron rules. I mean, a lot of your team building rules have changed. We just saw what Boston did.
Yeah.
You know, they have to. They're moving Drew Holiday.
Yep.
You know, and they're only saving. I think they saved $4.6 million, whatever it was, in salary. They saved $41 million on their tax bill, and there's probably more to come.
Right.
So part of that is, as JD alluded to, if you're going to extend Ja and you're going to extend Jaren Jackson Jr., somebody in that group had to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I do think there's probably at least one more thing as they continue to kind of reshape this team,
right?
How they want to do under their new regime.
And I think one of the most interesting things about the Holiday move too is that, to me, I haven't really studied this that closely, but it seems like the kind of one of the first moves that clearly would never have been done without the new CBA rules in place. That there's no way with the team that they have, given obviously the Jason Tatum injury is a factor in how they're going to look at next season, but you would think that you would just keep as much of that group together as you can, and that Drew's still a productive player. So that's part of it as well. The second team that I had, though, for intriguing offseason, and not because I necessarily think that they're going to be a contender, but Phoenix Suns, because I think after the trade that they made, they have so many guys at the same position.
Yeah.
So I'm curious of what direction are they going to take, because on one hand, you would think that in the situation that they're in, they're going to try to rebuild a little bit, kind of retool. What's going to happen with Jalen Green? They also have Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, but they also don't have their picks going forward, so they can't really go into the mode of like, okay, we're going to just gear up for the next couple of years. So I'm just curious to see how they're going to approach the rest of this offseason and how that's going to affect other teams as well.
And I think what that does is it continues to kind of push this thing that in the Western Conference, you're like next year, how many teams are trying to win? 13?
Yeah.
14?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe, and Utah apparently says they're going to win, but are they going to really push for it? Mm-hmm. You know, Portland's making this trade for Drew. They had a very good record after January. They extended Chauncey Billups. Okay, they're into it. Spurs are in it. Pels are going to try to retool. Kings are going to Kings. Mm-hmm. So they're going to try. Like, nobody's really tanking in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, the Suns can't. Mm-hmm. So
it doesn't benefit them at all to do that. Yeah.
Well,
everybody loves the West, guys.
Devin Booker will lead the league in scoring.
Yeah. There you go.
Everybody loves the West.
Get ready, right? And remember, the Lakers have been linked to everybody. So just that's the rule of thumb. Give me a hot take. Hot take for the draft or prediction.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I like Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida, and this is for the future. I think he's gonna be on the all rookie team. I just like him. Wow. I like the way he handles everything, and he's got to be with the right team. But watching him in the NCAA tournament, he was one of those guys who, nothing shakes him, nothing rattles him. You don't really speed him up. He's able to handle it, and he's an older guy. And so I just like him. I just like him. I've got a feeling, which I've been wrong with a whole lot of feelings. But this one, I like him. I like the guy.
I'm with you on that. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the late lottery, early 20s for a lot of teams. I'm not saying Pels specific, but I think as guys start to fall or move, there's going to be a lot of movement in there. Because like I said before, there's a guy who you might have at 14 on your board available at 20 or 21 or 20, whatever it is. I think there's just going to be a lot of movement, a lot of teams going back and forth. Because to build off of one of Jim's points earlier, because of NIL, the guy who, if I'm not, we're seeing a lot of 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds pull out. If you're a freshman, sophomore, you're getting out of the draft.
Yep.
Because I can go make more money. Right. We saw this with Drew Timme. Mm-hmm. Drew Timme, who finally made a splash, was making a splash with Brooklyn at the end of the year, but he was able to make more money at Gonzaga than he was on a rookie deal. Mm-hmm. You're seeing more and more, and those numbers, they're getting higher and higher and higher.
Right.
As we go through, I think the early entrants are some of the lowest numbers it's been in a very, very long time. So I think you're going to see more and more of those guys start to stay in. You're going to see a lot more of these 4-5-year seniors filling in the back end of the first round.
Whoever thought we'd see the day where it was more of a risk to go to the NBA financially than it was to stay in college. But I think that's what's happening right now to some extent. I mean, my hot take for the draft is someone picked very late in this draft will be among the best players in the end as a pro. And I guess I have a little bit of evidence. I don't want to get too deep into the numbers on this, but in the last 3 drafts,
they're all Syracuse players.
No, I'm actually not going to pick any. I'm not going to say anyone specifically from this draft, but from the last 3 drafts, for example, I went to Basketball Reference and I looked up career minutes played by each draft class. So if you go back to last year's rookie class, Jalen Wells was the 39th pick in the draft. He played the 3rd most minutes of any rookie in the league. Wow. By the way, Yves Missi played the 4th most minutes. He was the 21st pick. You go back 2 years, Toumani Camara was the 52nd pick in that draft. He's played more minutes than anyone from that class, which I thought is interesting. And then from 2022, Andrew Nembhard was the 31st pick that year, and he's played the 6th most minutes of anyone from that class. So I guess my point is that if you look at it, there's been at least one player from each of the last few drafts who's turned out to be super productive and among the guys that teams maybe look back at and say, man, I wish we would have taken that guy because he's much better than the player that we picked earlier in the draft.
Herb Jones.
Yeah. Hats off to scouting departments. Because if you can find a guy who fits what you do, you've got a guy. Mm-hmm. And he might be second round. He might be undrafted. Najee Marshall and, Jose Alvarado. If you can find a guy who does what you do, the guy can stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting, too, is obviously we've talked about it with health and what this team is. Is it a playoff roster? Do you have that kind of talent? Is there a vet that you're kind of excited about here? I mean, because we're not that far away. July, August, September, we start getting ready in training camp and preseason. But is there a vet you think that you're excited about maybe improving the most next year?
See, I was going to say, Carlo Makovich, because that's my dude. Or Yves Missi, but I don't feel like they're vet enough, second year guys. So I'm gonna go with Herb Jones, and I'm gonna go with Herb for this reason. One, he's coming back from injury, we know that. But I will say this: I hope that NBA officials allow Herb Jones to defend the way they allow Lou Dort to defend. And if you see that, he's going to jump off the page because he was already first team All-D anyway a couple of years ago when they were giving him still rookie calls. Now, if you let him defend, and grab people's wrists at half court like we saw in the NBA Finals, then he's going to be, because Herb is a legit great defender who doesn't have to do all the little tricks and that stuff. But if he's allowed to play, we know he's a guy who can, he's going to shoot 35 to 40% from 3, and he's probably going to shoot 48% from the field because he's going to get on run. He gets layups and dunks, and he'd probably shoot 80% from the line plus. But I think he'll make another jump, especially if he's got his healthy teammates around him.
I think the key for Herb is to get back into that. We've seen his shooting percentage go up, and we saw it go down a little bit. So last year, but if you go back to the previous season, he did start that year not very good from 3, and then shot tremendously the rest of the year. I'm gonna say Trey Murphy because I think we've seen Trey take a jump every single year, and he's going to be rehabbing his shoulder this summer. So there's going to probably be a slower when he does get back onto the court of how much is he going to be able to kind of take off right away. But this team needs another jump from him. And I think he is poised to do it. I think, again, Trey's not a guy. I think at this point in his career, he's not a guy you have to tell that, hey, keep shooting the ball. We've heard Willie Green kind of say that a few times over the last few years. I got to tell him to do that. I don't think you got to tell Trey to do that anymore.
No.
And the way, especially on this team and how things are going to shake out, I think looking at Trey as the guy who I need one more jump.
I went with Herb Jones for this, as JD did, and I'm sure Herb doesn't see it this way because he's, going back and forth between the gym and a fishing hole somewhere. But I kind of see this as the revenge of Herb. And I guess part of why I say that is it feels like from some of the discussion that I've heard this offseason or some of the completely moronic trade rumors that we see people post, that I think to some extent people have forgotten how good Herb is. I mean, the fact that he only played 20-something games, I think makes it easy for people to forget just how much of a force that guy was. The fact that he was,
and how many of those games were on a bad shoulder anyway.
That's a really good point as well. That he was first team all defense the year before that. So I just feel like it's going to be a chance for him to, and again, I'm sure he doesn't care about this or look at it this way, but just for him, a chance for him to serve everyone a reminder of how good of a player he is, and just how much of a factor he is. So please stop posting trade rumors where it's like the Pelicans trade Herb Jones and they get back me in the trade. Like, please stop this.
Jim, don't undersell yourself. You got value.
Jim knows his value, but Jim also knows Herb Jones' value.
Exactly.
He knows where Herb is.
I think it's interesting. I know we did this obviously at the end of the season. Is Zion understood in terms of most improved? Because when I think of him, I'm excited. And I'm not even talking about the health aspect of it, but he can develop the shot and stuff. I mean, we saw a lab video of Yves Missi in the last couple of days where he's shooting threes, he's driving to the basket, he's hitting elbow jumpers. Andrew, we talk about that all the time. If he can add to that game, look, we know he can drive. We know we can do that. But we saw at the end of last year when he was really in that stretch with that minute restriction, but just in that stretch, though, of the season, he was playing incredible defense out in the perimeter. He was really active like that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about improving his game on the court. For me, that's exciting if he could add other elements.
I have one number that I would like to see Z improve next year. And this is not so much that I think Z has to improve, but it's everything that has to go around Z. I want to see his minutes go from 28 to 33 to 34.
So yours is minutes. That's what you want to see.
That's all I want to see. Because with that, it means he's healthy. Means he's probably, look, we talk about the need for a one. Mm-hmm. That's your starting point guard next year. When it's October and you're getting on the floor for the first time, no matter how you want to say it, that's probably your starting point guard.
Yeah.
And we saw what he could do when he was kind of unleashed as that with these lineups at the end of the year. This is a guy who, we were in Minnesota. The Pels were missing a lot that game. Yeah. And he took Minnesota. He beat that team. Call it what it is. I mean, I think when you have him healthier next season and he's not on that restriction that he was for the second half of the year, if he can get to that 33, 34 minute range, you're going to see all those other numbers go up. And that, I think, is the key. That's the number one thing I want to see from Z next year.
If Z makes a couple of middies a game, that's really, because teams, obviously they back off and they wait for him at the rim. He makes a couple of middies, stretches the defense just a little bit. That'll be plenty. He doesn't have to be a guy who shoots a ton of threes. But if he makes a couple of middies to force you to be a little bit more honest defensively, then, because we've seen Z. It's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. He's going left, right? And you can't stop him. And you can't stop him. You know he's going left. You know he's going to end up at the rim. Mm-hmm. And you can't stop him. So if he makes you come out just a little bit and have to play just a little bit honestly, he'll get everything you want.
And I think the other key, we talked about having Herb get back to being, a 36, 37% shooter.
Yeah.
Having Trey out there, having CJ out there, having whoever else is out there, but having Yves Missi in that dunker spot. Because when Z drives, mm-hmm. it's all eyes on Z.
Yep.
And if that dunker spot, if you're there, if you can slip to the rim and get it, cool. But if you can add that little push shot, if you listen to any broadcast last year, you heard AD, you heard myself talk about the little 8 to 10 foot push shot, the little jumper there from Yves, which he threw a couple in, he sprinkled a little in late in the season. But he's got to get that part of his game more than I think he needs to shoot a three in the corner.
Yeah.
do anything else. Because if all eyes are still going to be on Z, nobody's going to be watching the dunker spot. That person is going to, who is protecting the rim, is going to have to step up, and Eve's going to be there, and then being able to make the right pass.
He can make an easy living.
All that kind of ties itself together.
Yeah, Andrew, when you were talking about the number that you were looking forward to, maybe this was too obvious. I thought you were going to go with games played, but I like the minutes as well. I think one of the things I'm looking forward to too is just seeing the impact of what Joe Dumars is going to have on Zion. We talked about this already a little bit with Rod in the previous segment of just the approach, and it's kind of like a blank slate. I think it's a fresh start, I guess, with Joe Dumars here. So I'm curious to see what is going to result from that for Zion.
See, I think Joe's going to be a little bit more demanding, if you want to call it that, a little bit more account heavy. I think he's going to, having spoken to him a few times, he just seems like one of those. This is what we expect from you. Deliver, and that's
that's simple.
Yeah, don't there's no sugarcoating and dancing around. This is what we expect. Do it, and that's going to be, I think, that, because you have to have, most guys, when you think about it, I think was it Stan Van Gundy who said Mike Krzyzewski told him,
play him,
play him, practice him,
get him on the court.
Yeah, practice him, get him. He wants to play.
Yep.
So okay, here we go, play.
I would say before we get into our final question, I guess just to wrap that up too, I think what I'm interested in is to your point, and Andrew, can you kind of talk about getting that opportunity to do it? Who's the unequivocal leader on this team? I know it's just like, hey, should be the face. You look at the two teams in the finals. Tyrese Halliburton led that team, right, in Indiana. SGA leads the Thunder. When you look at the teams that are successful in there, you know who that is, unequivocally. One way, shape, or form. The other guys are on, and they're about it, right? Would you all agree? Like, that to me is one of that steps I want to see this year. Unequivocally, to your point, that's in minutes played. That's in leaders. That's helping others grow. Like, that is our guy we can depend on each and every night. One way, shape, or form. I'm going to do what I can to not lose this game. Like, that's what I think we need here, regardless. Now, we like to think it's him, but that's part of that step.
Well, it's got to be him.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be him. Your best player has to be that guy. Now, I think DeJounte Murray probably has the personality for it. And I think C.J. McCollum has kind of the temperament for it. But your best player is the guy that everybody looks at and says, okay, we go as he goes.
Yeah.
And when you got a guy like Zion, we've seen Zion, short spans, but we've seen him freaking win games, just take them over. And it didn't matter who was on the other team. We've seen him take games over and win them. When you've got that kind of guy, everybody's looking around like, we got Superman. Okay, now we can, we'll do our part, but if all else fails, we throw it to this dude and he can go in the phone booth and he can win one for us. So, that's the kind of guy that leads by default, because he's so much of a gravitational pull and he's so talented, he leads by default. So he's got to assume the rest of the responsibilities, which is a maturity aspect, I think. But hopefully he will grow into that.
And I think to JD's earlier point about Joe Dumars, I think that is, he's going to put that pressure on him, and he's going to push Z to be the best version of himself, to try and draw as much of that out as he can.
Final thing, 30 seconds, man. You touched on the Desmond Bane thing. Any other of those trades and moves so far as we head into the NBA draft that have stood out to you?
I mean, the KD thing was intriguing because, you get Dylan Brooks off the floor, which I think is a plus for everybody who plays against Houston, because now you don't have that guy to aggravate the heck out of you. But Jalen Green, I thought, he was ascending, and I know he had a bad playoff series, but man, you give up young talent like that, man, you better be right. I'll just say that. You better be right.
I think in the East, I'm very intrigued to see how the standings are going to shake out, because you have three contenders who are not going to have either their best or second best player because of Achilles injuries next year. Jason Tatum, Damian Lillard, and Tyrese Halliburton. And it really can shake up what the East can be. I think all three of those teams still compete just because of the other players on their roster, no matter what other moves they're making. But I think the East is wide open. You mentioned the Desmond Bane trade. Now, does Orlando try to jump? Is Orlando a top 4 seed? Is the door wide open for Cleveland?
And Detroit back in the cut line. Oh, that's a shame.
Right. New York's sitting there. New York can try to retool some things, get their guy, get their right coach, and make some splash. So I'm really intrigued to see how the East shakes out.
I think one of my reactions to the Houston trade was that although they did give up Jalen Green, and he's been in the league for 4 years, and Dylan Brooks, I think, was a big part of their defense. When you look at the Houston roster, to me, I was disappointed from a Pelican standpoint that they didn't give up one of their other pieces that are young players that haven't played that much, whether it's, Reed Shepard or Cam Whitmore or Tari Eason. They just have a bunch of guys to the point where even after that trade, they still also have future picks from other teams, and they also have young guys. Like, they could make another deal basically if they wanted to try to get somebody who comes available on the trade market that you don't expect. So, I mean, that was the part of it that was, I guess, kind of a negative if you're a Southwest Division team, of saying like that there's other moves that they could make, because they've done so well with adding talent. Some of the talent we haven't seen play a lot, with Shepard being probably the most prominent example. But I like what I've seen from Whitmore when he's played, but he hasn't gotten in the rotation consistently either. So, I mean, the fact that they were able to do that, I mean, I'm sure Phoenix didn't have a lot of leverage. I think that was part of the problem. But yeah, I mean, Houston's in good position, unfortunately, for some of the other teams. I think they moved up. Durant is a huge upgrade over, either way, I guess, Green or Brooks. And then they have other players that can step in and fill some of those roles.
Abolish divisions, abolish conferences.
Revolutionary take.
I want to see
Houston
defend, because, like I said, Dylan Brooks is a professional adjutant, and so you lose that edge. And I want to see how they defend, because Kevin Durant's gonna look. He roll out of bed and give you 28. He just does. But you're gonna have to defend.
I will say this: if any team is equipped to do that because of their head coach, it's the Houston Rockets and Ime Udoka.
Yeah.
I think
because they have the adjutant in Tari Eason. There's a lot of guys ready to step up, and when you have Amen Thompson, I think a future probably defensive player of the year.
Yeah,
I think you're in a good spot no matter if you have.
That's
Dylan
what I was
going to
say. That's a big vote of confidence for him as well.
Yeah,
they have so many guys that they need to get on the court that it was almost like you kind of have to clear out a couple guys to do that.
Addition by subtraction.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy how tough the league looks. All right, let's see what happens.
No conferences.
Of course, the draft Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll be back with you to kind of get you ready for it. Before you know it, guys, September, Australia, preseason, we're off and running. So let's see what takes place. Andrew Lopez, sideline reporter, analyst for the Pelicans Radio Network. Mr. John DeShazier, as always, man, appreciate the time. And thank you, sir, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, for all of his stuff.
Enjoyed it.
Leading to the draft and then after the draft. Go to Pelicans.com.
All your mocks, all your notes, it's almost over.
No doubt. Hey, thank you, as always, for tuning us in on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.